Welcome to the deep dive. Sometimes you look at these huge old texts, centuries old, and you kind of think, okay, this is going to be full of dry, dusty rules.
Right, formal stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But today, while we're flipping that expectation completely, we're diving into really a guide to the inner life. It's an 11th century masterpiece by Imam Ghazali, Ihyâ'u Ulûmi'd-Dîn, The Revival of Religious Sciences.
And Ghazali's work, it's arguably one of the most influential books ever on Islamic spirituality. It really came out of a crisis, actually.
A crisis? How so?
Well, before him, a lot of the religious focus was very heavily on fiqh, the external rules, the outward forms of worship, the zahir.
Sure.
But Ghazali saw that the outside, well, it felt hollow because the inside, the bâtıni, the inner state, was being neglected. So he writes the Ihyâ pretty much to shift the focus back to the heart, to its spiritual condition.
I love that framing. So we're sort of bypassing the, let's say, the formal choreography of faith.
Yeah, you could put it that way.
And going straight for the spiritual engine room. Our mission today is to look at one specific bit, the book of intention, sincerity, and truthfulness. Right, we want to get a handle on how Niyet, that's intention, and Ihlas, sincerity, how they generate what Ghazali calls manevi kavet, spiritual power.
And how they determine if what you do, your actions, actually have lasting meaning, or if they're just, well, noise. Productive noise, maybe.
Or, as he puts it, mashakat, empty toil.
Exactly. This is basically an ancient framework, but it's incredibly relevant for, say, modern productivity, finding meaning. Ghazali gives you the user manual to make sure that everything you do...
Like prepping for a meeting, even.
Yeah, absolutely. Prepping for a meeting, negotiating a deal, reading a book to learn something new.
Yeah.
That it has some kind of lasting resonance. It stops your efforts just becoming that mashaka, that empty toil. It's about locking down the why that gives the what its value.
Okay, let's start at the base then. Niyet. Intention. Ghazali call it the Amelarin Ruhu, the soul of actions. How does he actually establish its importance, its supremacy?
So Niyet is basically the heart's internal compass point, its orientation towards a specific purpose. It's that fixed internal decision. And this leads straight into really the foundational principle for his whole system.
Which is?
Actions are according to intentions. Simple as that sounds, it's huge. The inner orientation of the heart is superior to the physical act itself.
Superior how?
Both in time because, well, the intention has to come before the act, right?
Logically, yeah.
And also in importance.
Okay, that's genuinely counterintuitive, though. We live in a world that's obsessed with output, visible results, what you can measure. How can the intent be superior to the actual outcome?
Because the intention shows the real desire of the heart. And Ghazali sees the heart as the commander, the emir.
Oh.
The body, the limbs, they're just the servants, the hadem, carrying out the orders. He gives this really powerful story, an anecdote, to show this.
Let's hear it.
Imagine someone who spends weeks, maybe months, getting ready for war. They train hard, gather supplies, their heart is absolutely set on participating.
Okay, fully committed.
Totally. But then, the night before the battle, they get struck down by a really bad illness, can't go. Ghazali says that person still gets the full spiritual reward, same as those who actually fought.
Wow. So the action itself was blocked, but the intention, the spiritual current, was already there, fully flowing.
Precisely. The Niyet was complete. But flip that around. Say you perform some huge, visible, physically demanding act, maybe a big charitable donation, but you do it without a clear intention. Maybe just because everyone else was doing it, you felt you should.
Right, sort of social pressure.
Exactly. Ghazali labels that niyat as amal, action without intention, and that, he says, is pure mashakat, difficulty for its own sake. No soul, no spiritual value, it's just an effort.
So this really forces a kind of radical self-honesty, which, let's be honest, is often way harder than just doing the thing itself.
Oh, absolutely.
I think Ghazali's method for this, his self-scrutiny technique, which you called his litmus test earlier, that seems incredibly useful.
Yeah, it cuts right through the self-deception. It immediately exposes if there's some kind of corruption in the motive. He talks to law students, for example.
Okay.
And he basically forces them to ask themselves, look, would you still be studying all this dense legal stuff if becoming a judge wasn't seen as prestigious, if it didn't come with status?
Oof. That hits home. It instantly checks the motive, doesn't it?
Right away. Is it genuine intellectual curiosity or desire to help? Or is it shurit fame, prestige?
That's brilliant. Let's translate that to today. Would you still push for that promotion, chase that senior partner title, if the only perk was maybe a slightly bigger office, but zero change in public recognition?
Yeah. Is the real goal solving the business problems, adding value, or is it the status that comes with it? If the prestige vanished, would the effort still be there?
And if the effort vanishes?
Then the Niyet was vulnerable, corruptible. But if the Niyet is pure, this is where the really transformative power kicks in. Ghazali shows how you can elevate totally mundane, everyday things.
How does he do that? Turn eating into worship?
Pretty much, yeah, by linking it back consciously to a higher purpose. Any act that's normally just neutral or worldly, eating, sleeping, working, things he calls mu'amalat.
Okay.
If you eat, but with the specific intention of keeping your body strong so you can better serve God or better fulfill your responsibilities. Or if you sleep with the intention of resting your mind so you can focus more clearly on spiritual matters or your duties later.
Then the act itself changes.
It's transformed. That mundane act becomes ibadah, an act of worship. The niyat is the bridge connecting the earthly action to the ultimate purpose, often framed as serving Allah or preparing for the afterlife.
That makes the focus on this inner life absolutely critical then. If niyet is the soul, we obviously need a way to keep that soul pure. Which, I guess, brings us perfectly to the next concept. Ihlas. Sincerity.
Exactly. Baslas means purity, basically. If niyat sets the direction, Allah makes sure the fuel powering the journey is clean. Ghazali defines it as a safeve kachkas's fila pure act, totally free from additives.
Additives
like contaminants. The action has to be done purely, solely for the pleasure of God, Reza Ilahi, completely cleansed of any foreign elements, especially things like Riyâ, which is showing off, or any desire for worldly gain, recognition, anything like that.
So the outward form, the ritual, the fuki shekil as you call it,
Right.
It's just an empty shell without that inner state.
Completely empty, like an empty box, yeah.
Yeah.
The ritual needs what Ghazali calls the actions of the heart, the kalivina melody, things like hushu, which is like awe or deep reverence, and murakabe, constant spiritual vigilance or awareness. Sincerity, alas, is the actual spiritual fuel.
Okay.
And this is where Ghazali introduces this hierarchy of intention that, honestly, I find incredibly radical even today.
You mentioned this earlier, the difference between the common intention and the elite intention. Avaman niyeti versus havasan niyeti. Tell us more about that elite standard. What does that look like?
So the avamam, the common folk, their intention might be perfectly valid, but it's often driven by, say, wanting to escape hell or gain the rewards of paradise. Basic motivations.
Seems reasonable enough.
It is. But the havas, the spiritual elite, they operate on a different level. They seek only Allah's pleasure, His Riyâ, and closeness to Him. They perform good deeds purely out of muhabbat love. They desire no reward, not worldly status, not even the specific pleasures of the afterlife.
Wait, hang on. No reward, not even paradise. He likens people hoping for paradise to a, what was it, Isir Isu?
A bad hired laborer, yeah.
So Ghazali is basically saying that even hoping for eternal bliss for the rewards of paradise is somehow impure. Isn't that pushing it? I mean, isn't reward a fundamental part of most religious motivation?
It is an incredibly high bar, absolutely. But that's the core of what he calls huzuz danbarad, detachment from gain, detachment from seeking personal satisfaction, even eternal satisfaction.
Wow.
Ghazali's argument is stark. If your heart is really motivated by, say, the promise of beautiful companions or rivers of wine in paradise, your ultimate motive is still satisfying your own desires. Elevated desires, maybe eternal ones, but still your desires.
Not pure love for the Creator himself.
Exactly. For Ghazali, the absolute highest aim is purely vichula, contemplating the face of God, seeking God for God's own sake, completely untainted by any self-interest, however lofty.
That's a fundamental shift in understanding motivation, isn't it? It implies that real spiritual power is measured by how much you can detach your effort from any outcome, even the ultimate one.
That's precisely it. And achieving that level of purity, that Ihlas, is so crucial because the main threat is always lurking, the threat of Riyâ, showing off.
And Ghazali's language here is strong. He doesn't just call it bad manners or vanity. He calls it shirki hafi, hidden polytheism. That's a serious charge.
It's incredibly serious because, you see, when you act with Riyâ, you're essentially introducing a partner into your worship, the human observer.
Ah, okay. You're doing it for their approval too, not just God's.
Right. You're seeking the approval of creation alongside, or even instead of the creator. And Riyâ isn't just neutral, it's actively corrosive. It doesn't just nullify the good deed.
It does more damage.
Yes. It actually reinforces your negative inner traits. Things like pride, kibir, and the desire for status, ka. Ghazali argues that the person doing things just to show off ends up in a worse spiritual state than if they'd done nothing at all, because they've fed their own ego, their vanity.
He uses this analogy, doesn't he? This sort of spiritual physics, the Kuvvetler-Dendiesi, the balance of forces inside you.
Yeah, think of it like a kind of spiritual force field operating within your heart whenever you act. You've got these two opposing forces, these vectors.
Okay.
There's Taqarrub, the approaching force, pulling you towards God. That's powered by Ihlas, by sincerity.
Right.
And then there's Tabid, the repelling force, pushing you away from God. And that's powered by Riyâ, by showing off.
So let's make that concrete. Say I give a sizable donation. Internally, I have, let's say, 10 units of genuine desire for God's pleasure, but I also have maybe 5 units of desire for people to notice, for my name to be announced. What's the spiritual math there?
Okay, so those forces are intention. In Ghazali's model, if your desire for human praise, Riyâ, equals your desire for God's pleasure, let's say, 10 units of each, the net spiritual gain is 0.
0. Even though I gave the money.
0 gain in qurbiyat, in proximity to God. You've done the work, spent the time, spent the money, but spiritually, you haven't moved closer. You only gain the difference if sincerity wins out. If you had 10 units of Ihlas and 5 Riyâ, you'd gain 5 units of qurbiyat.
So it's a constant battle.
It's a constant internal struggle, the mukahedi, which is why vigilance is so key.
And the devil, Shaitan, as Ghazali presents him, is clearly a master strategist in this battle, because the sources lay out these incredibly subtle tricks that Tilbisat used to undermine sincerity. We should probably spend a moment on these. They're quite revealing about self-deception.
Oh, absolutely. They get progressively darker, really, because they often disguise vanity as virtue. It's very insidious. Let's start with one called Riyâ Gamuz, subtle Riyâ.
Okay, how does that one work? What's the trick?
This often targets people who are already respected or in leadership roles, the muqtada, the role models people look up to.
Right.
The devil might whisper something like, look, you have to act more pious in public. You need to be seen giving generously, praying longer, because people follow your example. It's for their benefit.
Okay, wait. But setting a good example,
Sure.
Isn't that actually a good thing? Encouraged even.
It is, externally. But Ghazali points out the devil's twist. The real hidden motive is often protecting one's own status, their riyasat. They're secretly afraid that if people knew about their private, perhaps less intense worship, that their public standing would drop.
Oh.
So they ramp up their external display, telling themselves it's for the community's good, but the underlying driver is really preserving their own prestige. It's self-protection masked as public service.
Wow, that weaponizes the very idea of responsibility. It takes a potentially sincere motive, being a good role model, and twists it into defending one's own image. Okay, what's the next layer down? Even more hidden.
The next level is Riyâ Afa, the most hidden Riyâ. This is even trickier. This happens when someone feels maybe embarrassed or uncomfortable about the difference between their private worship, which might be very intense, very heartfelt, and their public worship, which might feel more relaxed or flawed.
Okay, so there's a gap between private best and public reality.
Exactly. And so they try to secretly increase their public devotion, their fervor, to make it match their private state. They want the outside to look as good as the inside feels when they're alone.
But they're trying to make their public self match their best self, their sincere private self.
Why is that still considered corrupt? It sounds like striving for consistency.
It sounds like it, but the corruption lies in the motivation for equalizing them. Why do they want to equalize them? Ghazali argues it's because they are reacting to human observation. It shows their heart still gives more weight to mushahede and san, human witnessing, than anything else.
Yeah.
He uses this striking comparison. You're embarrassed if people might see you in a state of lower concentration, but would you be equally embarrassed if, say, a cat or a dog, mushahedi behim, walked into the room while you were praying less intensely?
Probably not, no.
If the answer is no, then your heart is still fundamentally reacting to people, seeking their approval or avoiding their disapproval for its state. The standard is human opinion, not the divine presence itself. That is an incredibly fine-tuned psychological microscope he's using there. It implies our spiritual state needs to be utterly independent of who's watching. Okay, and the final one, the most minute form, Riyâ.
This one is truly subtle, what Ghazali calls mekr uhuda, a cunning trick or deception. It happens when you consciously use the thought, Allah is watching me, as a tool to increase your focus or concentration during worship or some good deed.
Okay, that sounds like a good practice, Morikabi.
It is a good practice, but the Riyâ comes in if you only employ this thought, this tool, when other people are present. So you're using a genuine spiritual technique, contemplating God's presence,
but only as a performance enhancer for a human audience.
Precisely. The truly sincere person strives to maintain that level of awareness, that contemplation, whether they're alone or in public. If the thought God is watching is reserved mainly for public display, it becomes a mechanism to subtly earn admiration for your apparent piety. You convince yourself, oh, my concentration is just naturally better when I'm setting an example, but it's a trick.
Maintaining that level of constant spiritual vigilance sounds, well, exhausting, but absolutely necessary if we want to anchor the spiritual power Ghazali talks about, which I suppose leads us right into the third pillar he discusses. Truthfulness.
Exactly. Sidq is truthfulness, but it's more than just not telling lies. It's about fidelity. It ensures that the heart's inner state, the bâtıni, is perfectly and consistently reflected in the outward actions, the zahir. It creates that zahir bâtin uyumu, the congruence between inner reality and outer expression. It's the anchor that holds Niyet and Ihlas steady.
And the crucial aspect of truthfulness that Ghazali really emphasizes isn't just about honest words, is it? It's something deeper.
No, it's much more about resolve, about follow-through. He focuses specifically on vafai azme sidq, which means fidelity or faithfulness to one's initial resolution, one's azim.
So sticking with it.
Sticking with it even when things get tough down the line. If you make a sincere intention today, maybe to start a new healthy habit, or undertake a challenging course of study, or break a bad pattern, but you bail the moment you hit the first obstacle.
Yeah. Ghazali warns that breaking that initial resolve, that azim, plants the seed of nifaq, hypocrisy, in the heart. Perseverance, therefore, isn't just a nice-to-have virtue. It's fundamental to spiritual truthfulness. You have to be true to your own commitments.
So the key, then, is constantly cultivating these inner states, niyet, ihlas, samlik. How does Ghazali advise us to actually maintain and strengthen this inner resolve and keep cleansing the intention from all those contaminants like Riyâ?
He lays out a practical path, really, a set of tools for spiritual cultivation. The big three are, first, muraqabah, that's vigilance. The active, ongoing, sustained awareness that God is constantly witnessing your actions, your thoughts, your intentions.
Okay, keeping that presence in mind.
Second, muhasabah, self-scrutiny or reckoning. This is like a daily or regular review of your intentions and deeds. Like a business owner checking the books, you check your spiritual balance sheet. Where did Riyâ creep in? Was my niyet pure in that situation?
Right, an internal audit. Exactly. And third, tefakkur, contemplation or reflection. Taking time to reflect deeply on things like the nature of the afterlife, the fleetingness of this world, the greatness of God. This helps maintain perspective and reinforces pure intention. These are the core practices for maintaining hulûs, that state of purity.
Okay, this brings us to a really critical practical dilemma, though. What if I'm doing something good, say giving that charity donation again, and halfway through I realize, oh no, that feeling of wanting recognition, that shadow of Riyâ has crept in. Should I stop? Should I abandon the good deed right there out of fear that it's now corrupted?
That is the crucial question, isn't it? And Ghazali, citing earlier scholars like Fudail ibn Iyad, gives a very clear answer. Absolutely not. Do not abandon the deed.
Really? Why not?
Because, as Fudail famously said, to abandon the deed because of people, i.e. fear of their judgment or noticing Riyâ, is itself a form of Riyâ, and to perform the deed for people is shirk.
Wow, okay. So stopping the action out of fear of impurity is actually just another way of letting people's opinions dictate your actions.
Precisely. It's Riyâ in reverse. You're still reacting to the observers, just in a negative way. The path forward, according to Ghazali, is to continue the action but fight the internal battle.
Keep going, but cleanse the intention internally, in the moment.
Exactly. You push through, you carry out the good deed, but you actively resist and fight against that impulse to show off. You strive to let sincerity, ihlas, prevail within the action, rather than just surrendering the field to the corrupting force by quitting.
This whole deep dive into Ghazali's framework really underscores it, doesn't it? True spiritual strength, that Manevi Kuvet, isn't measured by the sheer volume of your actions or how impressive they look from the outside.
At all.
It's measured entirely by the purity of your heart's alignment. The physical deeds, the savari, they're just the servants, like you said. The heart, the qalb, is the commander, the emir. That internal moral balance, that hulûs, that's everything.
Ghazali really sparked an internal revolution with this focus. He insisted, sometimes quite controversially, that without that pure intention and genuine sincerity, even the most perfectly executed external deeds are, spiritually speaking, dead on arrival.
So let's leave everyone with a final thought to chew on. Ghazali's intense focus on purifying intention, even demanding detachment from all gain, including heavenly rewards. Well, it seems almost alien in our modern world, doesn't it? A world driven almost entirely by measurable results, KPIs, external validation, getting ahead.
It's a very different paradigm for sure.
So think about this. What is the modern equivalent of Riyâ in your professional life, or maybe your learning pursuits? Is it perhaps constantly posting achievements online, mainly for the likes and validation, rather than for intrinsic satisfaction or genuine sharing? And maybe more challengingly, how could you possibly apply Ghazali's radical concept of detachment from gain to ensure the efforts you put in this week have a true, unconditional meaning beyond just the tangible results?
Definitely some food for thought there. Thank you for joining us for the deep dive.